Welcome back, part 3, Q&A, the We Teach Me Masters series, the art of copywriting and powerful words. So, Basil, this is Basil from IOB, everybody. Round of applause for Basil for joining us this evening. What were your thoughts this evening, Basil?
Absolutely loved it. As someone who works in marketing, it was a very engaging presentation.
Yeah, awesome. So Basil's maybe got a couple of questions for our guest speakers again. So guys, can we have a round of applause, please, for Georgina? Georgina, can you come back up to the stage, please? And Hanna, back up to the stage for us, please. Thank you. So Basil, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So just to start off with, what's the best piece of advice that you can give to brands who are looking to really cut through and differentiate themselves in the market? Both.
This is a very obvious answer, but think about what makes you different.
Yeah.
Like it sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. So it's going through those ideas of what do you add of unique value that other people can't offer? What can they get from you that they can't get anywhere else? And that kind of is sometimes what you're doing when you're developing a content strategy. So it's just going back to that really simple question for me would be the ultimate starting point, but also knowing who else is in the marketplace too, so you can kind of look at where you slot in as well.
I just want to add to that. Thinking about getting outside your product. So we were talking between ourselves earlier about the fact that often when you start a business, you're the one who's building the product. So you're kind of knee deep in this thing, and you're thinking about features and you're thinking about adding value in a technical or a product sense. And it can be really hard to think in terms of the user. And so you want to get outside that. You want to think about what creatively about how you can position yourself relative to competitors in the market, but in a way that's unique for your users, and that really connects with them on an emotional level.
Simple question from me, kind of what's the most enjoyable brand that you've worked with and why? What's been your favourite project?
I don't know if I can answer that question without singling people out. I feel like I'll get emails tomorrow. Well, I mean, to be honest, the two that I mentioned, so Australians Together, I've worked with them for years, and I love a good challenge. I think most consultants like a good challenge, so that's been a big one, but it's been really meaningful as well, so I've loved that. Like finding out how you actually make a tangible difference in a communications context. And I've been loving working with Your Grocer as well, because they're a really growing business with, and being able to see the results really tangibly and quickly as well, because sometimes things take time. So it's nice to kind of see that, but that's a really unique problem as well, because it's that sort of what I said before about looking at what else is out there and finding that unique place that you slot in, and being true to the brand. And so that challenge has been really interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. I like all my clients because they do interesting things and they give us the freedom to, I'm a freelancer, so they're like, we need you to do a thing. And so that's pretty fun. But at the moment I'm working with Leader, and it's a leadership training program. So it's a lot of content, very content heavy, and that's been a lot of fun. I'm doing some work with REA, that's a lot of fun. And I think Aconex was fun, SitePoint was fun. They're all fun. It's all fun.
So if it's all fun, surely you must have some instances of where it's not been so fun.
Totally.
Is there any kind of examples you don't have to single anybody out this time, but these are a horror story or two there?
They're not, yeah, maybe they are horror stories. No, like we were just talking a moment ago. So the example that Hanna gave of changing the word careers to jobs. So you can, just frequently, every day of the week, you're working with clients who are like, no, but we're about careers. We can't call them jobs, we're about providing people with careers. Or people who say, Australians are my target audience. That's not a creative brief, and that's not good enough, sorry. So they're the ones who cannot, you've got to be able to define who you're targeting and what unique value you offer. And if you can't define that, then obviously you need help with that, and your freelancers can help you with that potentially. But yeah, they're the hard ones, because then it's really hard to narrow down. Also, I'm working with some clients at the moment. I mean, when you work with startups, you often get this situation where startups develop features and they go, okay, I've got this audience, I'm developing this feature, I'm developing this other feature. Oh, let's wrap it together and we'll call it a product now. and then they market it on the basis of features, and then they get a bit further down the track and they're like, actually, no, we need to put some benefits around this, and they're a bit shaky about that. And so that's a bit of an ugly scene as well. If you want a good result, you want to think first about how you're going to position, like whatever your product is, even if it's just a collection of features that you put together, how you're going to position that to the market. And then you want to stick with that and test that for a while and see if that's working. And do a bit of research to see, could we be positioning this differently to make it a bit more effective or whatever. And if you're going to change position or pivot, as they call it, then that needs to be a strategic decision. That's not a, let's just write some more emails and see what happens, because that's a waste of everyone's time, yours particularly.
How can our audience also test the effectiveness? So obviously talking about testing, but how do you measure that, and how can people, delve into the metrics behind of what you guys are writing or they're writing?
Measurement's a massive topic, but super, super important, because otherwise you don't know if what you're doing is working. I guess there's probably a couple of ways I'd approach this. The first one that's really helpful is to think of it in a user journey framework, because then you're not just measuring everything, but you actually know which part of the journey does this particular channel or metric contribute to. So if it sits within awareness for you, then you're looking at awareness metrics like reaching or getting click-through and things like that. So it helps you to define which metrics are actually important to you at what stages. So always having a really good measurement plan is really important. But I mean, in terms of content, it's going to depend on the channel and also the purpose of it. So is it about just generally creating more engagement or awareness around your brand? Then it's metrics around how are people engaging with this content. Are they staying on a long time? Are they commenting? Are they sharing? If it's about conversions though, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, it's are you actually seeing there's a lift in the number of people who are arriving at your website, purchasing or signing up or whatever it is? You might not be able to attribute that to just the one post, which can be tricky. Often if you work in a big organization, they're like, well, that one post didn't work, or our Facebook channel is not driving conversions. Because it's part of a bigger whole, it's really hard. So you've got to really give it a good red hot go, try a lot of it, and then see if you can see that overall increase in contribution towards conversion. So I mean, that's kind of a non-answer, but it's just about defining what success looks like for you, having a really clear framework. So starting with a measurement plan or something like that. That would be my strategic big picture answer, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Georgina, anything to add to that one?
I think sometimes with words, it's kind of, words tend to be more results driven, because it's kind of like, okay, we've got an email, we want to see what the open rate is, or we want to see what the click-throughs are or whatever. So split testing, that kind of stuff. But one thing to step back from that is don't just test like, is the email converting or is the whatever call to action it is. Think about like how you're describing things, maybe split test that as well. So for example, are you calling them jobs or careers? What happens if you change that? What happens if you target different segments with slightly different key language, critical language in your lexicon? Testing that as well is kind of valuable.
Awesome. So Basil, before we put it out there, have you got another question before we put it to the audience?
Yeah, one more from me. So like it's an obvious one, but it's important to stress it, I think. So how important is tone of voice and consistency of tone of voice amongst the different touch points? And how can brands or businesses make sure that they are being consistent?
I'm totally going first on this. It's critical, like tone of voice is really important. So, and the way to make sure that it's consistent is to define it up front. So work out how you want to sound and work out potentially with a writer how you can translate those tone of voice qualities into writing techniques. And from there you write a style guide or you write some kind of or a product lexicon, and you use that consistently. So you work out if your product is called bananas, every time you say bananas, you're going to capitalise bananas because it's a proper noun, it's the name of your product, that kind of thing. Are you going to refer to bananas when you talk about the people who work at bananas? Is it going to be we, or is it going to be us, or is it going to be bananas? And those kinds of things really have a huge impact on the way you sound and the way you come across. So tone of voice is totally the biz, and a good style guide will make that happen consistently.
I think what I would add to that is, so there's a great quote from, I think it's Scott K. Rosenberg from Intel, and he said that when you have a different I think he was referring to brand style, but same applies for tone of voice. If you have a different tone of voice or a different brand across all your touch points, it makes for this semi-schizophrenic brand experience. And the idea is you're just going to run into a different person on every channel. And the reason why it's important that you don't do that is because consistency is the thing that builds trust. And so if you're seeing something different across everything you're doing, somebody's not going to trust you and they're not going to know that they ran into you every time. So it's really, really important. But the other thing that Georgina was pointing to is that you can't just assume people know what your tone of voice is. So I've seen organizations, especially startups, just be like, oh no, but people get it. They know what our tone of voice is. They don't, because your version of it's going to be very different to someone else's. So making sure you actually document it is super important, because otherwise you can't guarantee you're all on the same page, literally.
Can I just add something to that? Sorry, it's close to my heart, tone of voice. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, when we talk about tone of voice and it's all about, what kind of words will we use and how we document that, tone of voice comes from speaking. So the point that Hanna just made is that brands think, oh yeah, they know what our tone of voice is, and they don't. That's because I'm speaking in a certain way and I have an intention, an emotional intention that I'm trying to communicate to you through the tone that I'm using, my body language and all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned before that, obviously in writing we don't have body language, we don't have expression. I can't make eye contact with you through writing. So we've got to think of tone of voice as a two-way thing. It's not just me speaking, it's you taking that in and understanding that. And that is a really hard thing to get right through writing and across channels and across multiple communications pieces. So it's a really huge deal.
Great advice, guys. So we're going to put it out to the audience. Hopefully you guys have got some questions for our guest speakers this evening. Anybody like to go first? Excellent. We're going to pass this microphone around naturally.
Thanks for the great presentation. The question I have is for Georgina. You said something about shortening words and sentences, and the example that you gave seemed like a very feeble attempt on capturing the SEO and the words like motivation. And when you said shorten words, and the example that you gave wasn't really covering any of those things, do you think that shortening words would actually miss out on a lot of attempts on identifying those keywords?
Yeah, so I'm working with a brand at the moment that is really, really heavy into SEO, and one of the things that they told me is that to beat the competitors, to rank above their competitors in Google, their page has to be at least 250 words longer. I can't advocate that at all. That's writing for machines, it's not writing for people. And I'm about writing for people. So I feel like if you have SEO keywords, which most people do, you need to be documenting them in your style guide. That's the first thing. You need to make them a critical part of your lexicon, which means they can't really change that often. So you've got to commit to those words. And if the market evolves and they start searching for different things, then you have to evolve, but you can't just switch overnight. I don't feel that's really, because that's not being true to your brand. That's about capturing search traffic. And I feel like if we're talking about people like traffic, that's just an ugly scene. Like that's not, I'm not cool with that. But I feel too like once you've worked out what your keywords are going to be, then you need to use them strategically in your communications. And keyword stuffing and all that kind of stuff is just not the go. And so yeah, you can still use conversational techniques around your keywords, but you have to be even more careful about where you're putting your keywords and what you're saying around them and how you're phrasing stuff. So I feel like it's best to write for the user and not for the machine, I guess, is my bottom line on that.
Yeah. I think what I would add to that is search more and more is trending towards conversational sort of things anyway. We're seeing long tail keywords obviously just become bigger and bigger all the time as we're getting used to talking to our computers. So we're searching like, how do I find the right super fund? And that's just normal language. So I think in a lot of cases, your copy will actually, if you're doing it conversationally, should actually match up with your keywords, and using them strategically is so important. So just thinking about how do you do it in a way that's, going to help with your search engine rankings, but it's natural, adds to the user experience. Because the overarching thing as well is Google seems like they change their mind all the time, but they're actually just moving towards a better and better user experience all the time. So if you're doing that too, you're going to be in line, and it's not going to be in competition, you know, one or the other, like I've got to pull these keywords in. They're always going to rank you better if your user experience is better. Yeah.
Awesome. Great question. Anybody else out there with a question? Yeah.
I'll direct this question, I think, to Hanna first, because you mentioned it in your speech. I think you spoke about storytelling, particularly being used a lot in not-for-profit, sort of building that emotional connection. Do you mind just touching on how to find the balance between telling that story and building a connection, which traditionally has been paragraphs and copy, and I guess people's attention span, be sure that we're losing them after the first sentence?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the last stat that I looked at was like you've got 7 seconds to grab someone's attention. It's probably less by now, because I think that stat I pulled like a few months ago or last year. So yeah, I think that's where the clever copywriting really comes into it. So knowing what that baseline story is and pulling out, often if you think about social media, pull out the conversation starters. Like what are those things that are going to grab somebody's attention and make them want to stop? So the example that comes to mind right now is with Australians Together, because we're building out their Australia Day campaign. And the kind of one of the key little phrases is we're not trying to explain the whole issue or explain what they should think and feel about it. It's just like, are you sorting through the confusion this Australia Day? Find out what all the fuss is about, click through. So that's only touching the surface. So it's just pulling out, especially for your surrounding channels, what are those things that are gonna spark someone's curiosity, tease them towards what you're trying to tell them, kind of compel them to think, I'm gonna find something interesting if I click on this. And then on the page, just, you know, I really think telling that story effectively, and however many words that takes, sometimes long can work, sometimes short is better, but our attention spans are always getting shorter, so thinking about that's important. And that's where multiple formats come in as well, so don't just think of it as text. We've talked a lot about copywriting, but stories are told just as much through the visuals and through the multimedia, the videos that you're using as well. And text is very rarely just going to be by itself too, it's usually with an image, so think about how they both play together. How do you use stuff like video, like animation? That's always being prioritized by social networks. So yeah, think about how you're telling it across formats, think about starting the conversation, not trying to have the whole conversation, and just using your words wisely. I think I had a journalism teacher who told us only give someone exactly the amount of information they need to know at that sentence, and then give them the next bit and the next bit. So don't try and, you know, shove it all up front, because they'll just sort of lose interest.
I just want to add a little something to that, which is messaging. So, like, thinking about, to that point, not just I've got all this stuff to say, how am I need to get it out there, but like, how am I going to organise this story so that it's navigable and it makes sense and it hangs together? What things do I absolutely need to include, and how am I going to position those? That messaging, you know, that's like a sentence for every paragraph, and a paragraph might be a single sentence too. So yeah, just thinking about that messaging can help you organise what you need to say, and also cut out what you don't need to say.
Excellent question. Anybody else out there? Gentleman in the black, thank you.
As copywriters, you guys probably spend a lot of time just playing with feelings, the words, right? Being able to evoke feeling from words. So, and there are certain emotions or certain probably human responses that you guys probably like to play with the most, depending on time. What particular human responses, or say motivation, like the self-made story, or the good old Australian, or like the extra kind of human response. Which of these human responses have you copyrighted for that you feel will be able to? Which one of these responses is the best method to use when raising money?
Do you want to go first?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, sure. That's a very good question, and there might be somebody else who comes up here and disagrees with me. I think it's a combination of different factors. So what you spoke to about the whole Australian thing, definitely there's a rise in this nationalism idea and people kind of growing feeling that they want to look after, their neighbours or our own. So that's an interesting trend. I don't know whether it's something I necessarily draw on as a trigger on its own, but it's something I'll often pop into messages. So, that idea of helping people who need your help on your doorstep, or people in our neighbourhood that we might not think about. But I mean, practically the bigger picture, if I can remember all the things that I want to say right now, is I think giving people a sense that they're making an impact, so they can actually see a tangible difference if you can show them that your money is going here and it's going to make this difference. So something that's real, that's credible, that's impactful, either through a statistic or a story, so impact's big. Showing the need is really important, and I know that that's tricky in the not-for-profit space because we want to show the positives and lift people up and show all of their story and all of them as a person, so that's tricky. But you've really, urgency and need is massive. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to cut through to someone. And I think that kind of applies in a product sense. You've got to make somebody feel like they need to do this now, or that there is a real need to act, or if they act now, they're going to see benefits. So urgency, need, impact, and storytelling is always a big one there. It's like making that emotional connection to something that someone might not have thought about before. Hope that helps.
I haven't written a lot for charities or not-for-profits. And when I think about giving that I do, I have a personal motivation to do that. So I feel like if you're talking to people who don't have a personal motivation, then you're in a difficult situation because you have to create some kind of I feel like it's more than emotional connection. I mean, we watch the news and we feel empathy for people, so it's got to go beyond that. It can't just be here's a story and a reason why you should give money to people is not enough. But the other thing I think to that is that one point that Hanna made before is it's really nice. With all the bad news, it's really nice to see good news. And a lot of the organisations that I give money to or time to are organisations that show that they're having a positive impact. So I'm kind of I really want that this is great and I feel really happy about it. So I tend not to respond to those, as a consumer, I tend not to respond to those negative things. But the other thing I wanted to say to that is that whenever I'm trying to write calls to action, whether it's for buying or whatever, I try not to make them too ugly. Obviously you need to have a call to action, like join now or buy now or subscribe or whatever. But you want to feel like you're on the side of the user. I always want to feel like I'm on the side of the user, not trying to sell to them. So you want to try and create that rapport and stuff and the we get you thing before. So then joining us is joining us, not join us, come over the divide. We're already on the same side. So yeah, that's...
Can you say joining us in comparison to joining us, right?
Sorry?
You said joining us in comparison to joining us.
Well, I mean, in terms of whether you're using continuous verbs or base verbs, it's more, I'm just saying that you want people to, I always want people to be on side before I ask them for something. So not just kind of I'm selling, come across, make this leap to me. No, I'm I'll make the leap to you and then we'll be on the same side and then I'll bring you on the journey kind of thing. Does that make sense? It's very general.
In the context of what I was asking, was more for startup, not really for say you go to a campaign,
Cool. I've got a quick question actually. We're going to pass the microphone to the lady at the front, and in that time I'll just ask a question. So do you guys, it's all right, I think my voice carries. Do you guys prefer working with the smaller brands or the most established, and which do you find the most challenging?
They both come with their own unique challenges, I think. I
or
think
brand new brands, so somebody that's just starting out as opposed to somebody who's
more established.
Yeah.
Because I think I was thinking more of the challenges that come when you're a large company and you've got lots of internal things going on. And to your question before about what the hardest things are that we work with, it's usually those internal challenges of how do you get people to see things the way they need to see them to achieve a goal. But I mean, I find them both interesting, exciting. New is very they're different feelings. When you're in a new space, it's kind of uncharted. You're not sure what's going to work. You're just trying a lot of stuff. It's a very different feeling to having a lot of data and experience and a track record behind you that you can use to sort of give you a picture of what's going to work best. So yeah, depending on which space you prefer to play in, I think new can be really exciting because you don't know, and I like that kind of thing. But yeah, so they're both different and interesting. Yeah.
Your preference, Georgina?
I think it's the same, like they're both different. I think though, with smaller like real startups, there's a lot of, you can try anything, and that's a whole lot of fun. And often people who have real startups are a bit like, oh, I don't know what to do. And it's nice to, as a writer, to be like, let's do this, let's give it a go. And you can kind of help that process along and help them be a bit more comfortable with communications and stuff. So that's really fun. But to the point of, I work with some, what we would consider bigger brands, and I feel like within product teams I do a lot of product writing, so interface text, and I feel like there's a lot of, they are like working like startups. So they're kind of like, there's not a lot of strategy. So I think, Hanna's working with people who at least have some appreciation of strategy, where I feel with a lot of even established brands in Melbourne at least, there's still not a lot of understanding of strategy. So that can be challenging, but at the same time it can mean that you end up doing some creative stuff and helping with some unusual things, so it's good.
Awesome. Lady at the front.
Copywriters often work with marketers very closely, and they want to push their key messages across. How do you convince them to not use glib expressions or cliched expressions that marketers tend to go to time and time again, and to actually tell a story?
Yeah. So do you mean how do you convince the marketers or the copywriters?
The marketers.
The marketers. Yeah, okay. I would get inside their heads and think, how do marketers think as a marketer? We care about results. We want to achieve our business objectives, and maybe depending on where we're at in our journey of understanding user experience, we might want a good user experience. We might want to get more leads, conversions. So I think it's usually about speaking their language, and that's often what I'll do in talking with anyone in an organisation, is think what matters most to this person. So in that context is being able to say that, well, actually we know that people are far more likely to convert if you use X, Y, Z, or so there's a great stat around stock imagery, which is an interesting one. So not about cliches in copy, but that's kind of the equivalent, but in imagery, is that our brains actually turn off when we see stock imagery. We just ignore it when we know that it's stock imagery. So being able to give nuggets like that explain the strategic value of what you're doing, and why you think it's important. Sometimes that's tricky if you haven't got a lot of other experiences to speak to, but I think reading what's out there and being able to kind of bring that information to them and position it in a way that's like, your job's going to be better and you're going to do better if you let me write it like this, and we're going to win together. I guess it's that kind of sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could add to that is that I try to give examples. So I'm kind of like, if they come up with something and I'm like, that's pretty naff, then they're like, well, put your money where your mouth is. What have you got? So you got to have some alternatives for them that you think are really good alternatives, and be able to back that up with justifications. Because people are always like, oh, do you have anything good? Do you have anything better? And then you're like, this is better, and then they say, well, why? Like, why should I choose this? You got to be able to justify that, the copy choices. So you can't, if you're going to be a writer, you can't just be like, oh, it sounds nice. Got to be a bit more specific.
Yeah.
Gentleman at the front.
What are some examples of great storytelling?
Oh, that's a really big question. Charles Dickens? No, that's not the answer. Do you have any off the top of your head?
I can think of great stories.
I think great storytelling with brands. For some reason, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre keeps coming into my head. I love them, they're great. We did a bit of work with them a while back, but now they're just killing it and they don't even need us. So they are just really great at helping people to connect the importance of what they're doing and understand the issues that are really complex, and also activate people to give. They've really kind of got that mix down pat, and also the story that happens after you give to them as well, and you kind of follow on from that. But I think there's other brands that are doing interesting things around their content and their copy that aren't necessarily like storytelling, but I think Koala Mattress is a great example. I wanted to buy one for like 3 years and I don't have one, and I just tell everyone about them because they just do such a great job at giving you the idea that it's just going to be the most amazing experience you've ever had, from like ordering the product to sleeping on it to trying it for 3 months. So even though their messages seem quite granular and specific, it actually all comes together to form this picture in my head of an experience that I would really, really love. And I think that's probably actually what I'd term great storytelling. So there's other brands like Air New Zealand, great experience. Like you just know it's going to be great before you get on the plane. I just love them. They're great. So thinking about what's that experience you can create that people want to walk into, I think they're the brands that do storytelling well that I really admire. And I'm probably going to walk away and think of like 5 others. So maybe I'll tweet them later.
Thank God Hanna just gave us some examples because now I've thought of some. So when Hanna mentioned your grocer before, that really reminded me. So as I mentioned before, I live in the country. We don't have your grocer out there. We don't have public transport. We don't have anything. But one thing we do have, which might surprise you if you're not from the redneck Australian countryside, is that we have a lot of support for local producers. Which sounds really weird, but we do. Like we have, like there's a dairy near me. It's an organic dairy. It's local, and everyone's on Facebook going, "Yeah, I love the dairy," and they're putting up photos. Oh, we're having 70 school kids through the dairy today to pat the cows or whatever they do. I'm like, where's my dairy to it? So I think those local, some of those hyper local brands tell really good stories, so that they can be really good ones to look at. And in terms of big brands, one that I am thinking of is Hester. Love Hester. Love it. But the other one is Bank Australia. I don't know if any of you know Bank Australia. I got a Bank Australia account because they had like great interest, which was not time limited. So I was like, fine, going with Bank Australia. And then I was in the branch and I started seeing all this stuff about what they're doing. Like they're like a cooperative, or like kind of the equivalent of a cooperative. So they're like a not-for-profit bank. And I'm like, hang on a second, what's going on? And then they're like supporting all these environmental initiatives. They kept sending me emails about it. And I'm like all the other emails, I'm not unsubscribing from these. Like, this is interesting. And I'm kind of into that stuff. So I'm like, oh, hang on, I made this really great buying decision based purely on an interest rate. And now I'm like, oh, they're really engaging me after the fact. And there are a lot of brands that kind of fail to do that. So Bank Australia is probably another good one to check out.
That kind of leads on to my question. So we talk a lot about like the attract and engage phase, and obviously you can lead them there with the idea of a great experience, but then have you got any examples of the wow factor afterwards and how you can continue that conversation afterwards to provide more value? Bank Australia.
Yeah, I can't think of any actual examples that jump off the top of my head, but I know generally, actually, Salem Seeker Resource Centre has definitely done this for me, making you feel valued and like you've made the right decision. So I get like little postcards from them with personal messages on it, or invitations to VIP events. So it's like that, making you feel really special, like you've, I guess, made a connection, that you're important. I guess it's that feeling of community a little bit as well. But even like, so I got upgraded on my Virgin Velocity membership recently, and I'm a sucker for like rewards and like VIP experiences. But it's sort of that idea of how do you create that experience that I'm loving, but for your brand. I think actually Morgan from Your Grocer mentioned Naked Wines is a really great one to check out, and so I was having a look at them. They're really fun, really kind of cheeky, a lot of personality in their follow-ups. You kind of like feel like you're getting a little bit of a connection to their brand. Who Gives a Crap? Now I'm thinking of lots of examples. Also wonderful. They do some of the best marketing, and that includes like their newsletters. Always so fun. So some of those smaller brands that can have a little bit more fun. So it's making you feel like you're kind of part of something and you're involved, and you've got this little secret that maybe nobody else has.
I just want to speak to the other end of that. So Hannah's mentioning brands that make you feel like a VIP or like you're special or whatever. And I just had a couple of experiences recently giving to, they were charities, not-for-profits, and they're supporting Indigenous communities in remote Australia. And one of them sent me, so I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to give some money like you do with, say, Greenpeace or something like that. And I've found that with those bigger brands, they tend to be like, thanks for your money, here's another sad story, please give us some more now. But these guys gave me, so Walter is one that operates in Central Australia. They sent me completely unexpectedly a maybe 20-page glossy magazine, which gives a whole lot of information about the communities that they serve. And it helps to, it's not about like, here's where your money's going. It is not about that. It was about different things that are happening in different communities they serve, different initiatives. And one of the pages which I thought was really interesting was illustrated, like hand illustrations by people in that community to create a poster which I think was used through multiple communities to raise awareness of suicide risk and how you can prevent or try and reduce suicide risk in these communities, within the community. So person to person, not here's an authority who's going to reduce the suicide risk, like within the community. So I felt like I was really part of something, but not through being a VIP. And another one that I just gave to is this group called Eon, and they're in WA, and they're bringing food production training and capability to remote communities. So in remote communities, obviously food availability is a huge issue, like quality food availability. Other than bush foods, like this, it's just terrible. And the cost is really high because shipping costs are high. So they're doing this thing. And so I, again, just kind of like, oh, that's great, I'll give them some money. And they sent me so I got the receipt, and then the next day I got a personal, apparently it appeared to be a personal letter from whoever, someone, it wasn't like the CEO or anything like that, it wasn't that obvious, it was from someone who works in the organisation saying, hope you got your thing, your receipt, and here's a bit more information or something. So it was kind of, it's not about me being privileged and it's not about it being exclusive, it's about now you're part of our community, which is a really warm, lovely thing to feel.
I'll add one last thing, and I think that's from a product point of view, helping people to use the product well and get more out of it is a really good one. So, and I was looking at MyUp when I thought of that, but obviously when you're onboarding people, you want them to feel like they know how to use it, that they feel confident that they're getting you're introducing them to secret things. Like I get emails from Trello telling me about little things that I didn't know about, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, and I can use the platform even more than I did before. So that's a really practical one from a product point of view as well.
Guys, we're coming towards the end, so maybe we've got time for one more question. Is there anybody else out there with a question? Gentleman there? Yep. If you can just pass that back to the guy back there.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to ask about in measuring your communication strategies, how much time should you spend on a strategy to decide if it's working for you?
A rule of thumb is probably, at least a couple of months, depending on where you're distributing content or what you're doing. That's probably more from the distribution point of view. So if you're running ads or you're doing a content strategy on social media or you're doing some newsletters, a couple of months is usually a good, probably a little bit too much, but not too much, but gives you a bit of buffer as to measure on those external channels whether it's working. In terms of your central sort of website or product, that's probably determined by how many people you tend to get coming through the door. So you just want to get to that critical mass where you feel like you've got enough where you can make a decision. So sometimes websites you can sometimes iterate a bit quicker because if you're getting lots of traffic, you can kind of see straight away if you change something, how that changes. Yeah. Anything to add? Not really. Yeah, cool.
I've got a question actually. Maybe we'll finish up on this one, but the future for search and obviously voice, how much consideration do you give to voice, and is conversational copy good for that?
Yes, it is. So I think, like I was saying before, we're trending much more to using long tail full sentences in our searches because mainly we're using voice more, so that will only increase. And so, yeah, definitely it's really helpful for conversational copy, but it means you've got to think about not just abstractly, what are my users thinking and feeling, but what might they actually be saying, what are those questions they're asking, what are they typing into a search engine. So I think, yeah, I definitely say that it's good from so many perspectives, whether that's from your search strategy, user experience, the storytelling, just doing it that way, it ticks so many boxes, yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that is listen. to what they're saying. So I'm just working with a client at the moment, and we said, oh, we really need to do some market research. And they were like, yeah, all right then. And we just got so much information, which was just so invaluable about, and I've got to tell you, like, this client was like, our product's boring, everyone hates it. People who know it hate it. Most people don't know it. The whole product category, it's a nightmare. People hate it. And so we were like, okay, this sounds great. Let's get on board. And then we did this research, and yeah, people hated it. But in this product category, they had such hope and such joy and such excitement about other aspects of the category. And so with this open, because our clients like, yeah, we just don't want to sound too terrible. And we were like, hang on a second, let's position. So, and everyone else is like, we'll make it less terrible. And I'm like, let's not go in that positioning. Let's position towards, we're on this fabulous, exciting journey with you, and we're going to help you. Like, this terrible stuff is part of the journey, and we're going to help you with it. But actually, the thing we're focused on is the happy thing with you. So that, what I'm saying there is, if you can listen and really find out what people are searching for, not necessarily just for your product, but around your product in the category, that can help you get some positioning that's a bit more interesting, a bit more creative, and maybe a bit more inspiring.
Awesome. Okay, so guys, can we have a round of applause for our guest speakers this evening?